The best export we have is common sense. You're listening to Rush to Reason.
All right, we are back. Rush to Reason, Denver's Afternoon Rush, KLZ-560. Dan Snowberger joining us now, Superintendent of Elizabeth School District. Welcome, Dan. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate being here.
I appreciate it. No, thank you for joining me. I followed this story a little bit, throughout the news and, knowing some folks that know you on a direct basis. But, you reached out, and more than happy to have you on to talk about this with our listeners here. So give us an update. There's a lawsuit. Make sure that I'm hearing this correctly. There's a lawsuit against your district from the ACLU. Explain all of that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we last fall we began a process reviewing our library books after parents expressed some concerns about books that their children were bringing home.
Okay.
And the process had identified a handful of books, about 19 of them, that were inappropriate in libraries, different age groups that were of a concern. Instead of just throwing them away, as maybe some school districts might do, we actually displayed them and invited parents to come in and give our board their feedback on what they felt was best to do with them.
Okay.
Overwhelmingly, our community felt like they were inappropriate to be in the libraries where they currently sat, and our board, following the will of our community, removed them from the library. About 4 months later, the ACLU filed a lawsuit on behalf of a couple of families in our community, and we have been battling that since December 20th of last year, and that has been an ongoing issue for us. Some of these books contain some pornographic material, certainly material that we find pretty shocking, and certainly material that doesn't add educational value to our libraries, and so that's been something that we've been working through here in our district.
Okay, and just to make sure that we are clear for folks listening, so that as they may have this conversation around their own family water cooler, whatever the case may be, you're not talking about just banning anything that's there that might be a little bit outside the box, to where maybe one parent doesn't mind, but somebody else thinks it's okay. I mean, this is collectively where the parents have gotten together and said, at this time in our child's lives, this really isn't appropriate for them to be reading, which by the way, I can't disagree with that.
Right, exactly. And again, we actually have a process where material that some parents may find sensitive and others may not, we actually have a system where a parent can say, I don't want my books checked, or I don't want my children checking out those books, but you may. And so we have a system in place for what we call sensitive content.
Okay.
These books actually are over the top, meaning, again, they have some pretty graphic pornographic material that just really don't belong in the hands of children. Even when you buy the book, it outlines an age group that just didn't fit where they sat. So, for instance, they were in the middle school, and the book's recommended for children 17 and older. So
this is almost like an R-rated movie versus a PG movie.
Exactly. Some of the odd things about these books are, as we were responding to the complaint from the court and sending that through our email filter, the federally mandated email filter, we couldn't transmit some of the content in these books over our email.
I'll tell you something.
So that's confusing when the federally mandated email filter won't allow you to transmit the content in these books, but we're being sued to put them back on our shelves.
I always have a dumb question along these lines, because I'm kind of an outsider with all of this, Dan. How do these books make it there in the first place?
We have non-licensed librarians. We have people who have volunteered to be librarians. They get minimal training, but oftentimes book companies will put together. You can buy these 100 books for $1,000, and we'll send you the file to upload them into your systems. And sadly, sometimes those books are included in packages like that. And
I see. So that makes sense. By the way, I've always wondered, how do these things get there in the first place? And what you're really telling me is it's sort of this package deal where they sort of, in a way, get snuck in.
Yep. Used to be years ago, you'd have a licensed media specialist who would hand select books to order for your library. And over the last 10 to 15 years, book companies will put together packages, and you'll buy the package. These books have been in our library, some of them since the late 90s. Half of these books have never even been checked out, and so that's the other concerning piece is certainly half of these books have never been checked out, and yet again we're trying to be forced to put them back. Their argument is the board is banning them because of political ideology. And again, the board's made the decision based upon the content of the book and not based on political ideology.
Okay, and I get that whole end of things, which makes total sense to me, by the way, as far as what you just said. I guess question, though, just being the business guy that I am and looking at an end around all of this, why not just come up with a system whereby if a book isn't checked out in X amount of time in our libraries, period, they're just going to be removed from the shelves, avoiding all of this other nonsense, or is that even an option?
We do that. We actually weed our books every year. Again, through the concern of the community, since it was brought forward, I think our board felt like we needed to be transparent.
I see.
And so when you have parents coming forward and saying, hey, we're concerned about what's in your libraries, the board felt like, hey, let's be transparent. Let's make sure parents know we're responding to their concerns.
Okay.
We felt like we found these books. We put this sensitive topic system into place so that parents can opt their children out of books that might contain sensitive topics. Like you said, I as a parent may not want my child to read it. You may be fine having your child read content like that. These books were over the top, and they felt like, let's be transparent and make sure that our community knows that we're responding to their concern.
Which again, I'm all for. In fact, that's the way it ought to work. You know me, though. I'm always thinking outside the box. And
Absolutely.
Rather than letting the left try to have these wins and going through costly litigation and things like that, what's the alternative to still get to where we want to go without having all of that involvement?
Absolutely, and John, this is unsettled law, and I guess that's the sad part is there actually is not legal precedent in this matter, and so as a school district in Colorado, local control is you have an elected school board who your community elects. That school board is empowered by the citizens who have elected them to make curricular decisions. The library is an extension of the curriculum, and so should the school board actually be able to respond to the will of the citizens to ensure that the content in the school is appropriate? And in this case, I believe it's probably a case that needs to be determined so that school districts around the state and around the country need to be able to do their job. And so as frustrating as it is, we've been fortunate to have people from around Colorado and around the nation actually step up to help us, and we're working really hard to keep this from not impacting our students. We've been fortunate to have groups like Parents United and the Article 3 Project step up with fundraising to help us make sure that this doesn't impact our district budget, and that's been very helpful to us. Obviously, this is not going to be a short-lived case. It'll be a case that'll probably take a year or so to resolve. It's right now at the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, and we have no doubt that it may take a while before it's actually resolved.
So part of I would think the end goal of this is going back to your point on there's no real precedence. This would, depending upon its outcome, hopefully be in our favor. I say our favor because I'm on your side. I would hope that we'd then have some precedence for other school districts across the country to go off of. Is that the idea?
That's exactly the case.
Okay.
I mean, I think in the end, we as a school district need to know that we can do the right thing, that when a community steps up and says, we need to ensure that content in our schools is appropriate, that school districts can do this, that we don't have to hide behind, throwing things away in the dark of night. Yes, that could be easier, and I've had many people say, Dan, you should have just done it quietly. But again, the right thing is never easy to do, and I think in this case, we're going to ensure that.
No, given everything you've told me in regards to which I'm just astonished at, that we don't have a precedence for this across the country, which to me is just maddening. Why we don't is absolutely ridiculous. We ought to have that, and every state ought to have some guidelines. If nothing else, have guidelines along the line of, if it says the book content is for X age and above, then we will abide by that to start with.
Yep. Yep, and we've read some of the books on air on some other stations, and it is bone chilling to actually, when people hear some of what's in these books, and again, to be said, oh, you're just against political speech. No, this is pornography, and it's embarrassing to read, and it's embarrassing to think, your 14-year-old at the high school could pick up this book and read this and think, this is appropriate. What is this doing to forward their reading ability, to forward their knowledge of history? Right. That none of this has educational value, and why we send children to school.
Well, and again, for everybody listening, as all people know, I'm very much I kind of like that hands-off approach, Dan. If you're not bothering me, then great, then I'm not going to bother you, and, you do your thing, and we'll all be good at the end of the day. That's fine for us as adults. But when it comes to young people, it's a whole different world, because we as adults are responsible for their upbringing. And this is probably the only thing I would agree with Hillary on collectively, not that it takes a village to raise a child, but collectively we're all participating in the rearing of these children. And the reality is, in this particular case, where there's how do I want to say this, Dan, an overarching theme that might be going on inside of the district and a lot of other districts as well, by the way, that needs nipped in the bud, period.
Yep. Agreed. I mean, the reality is, in Colorado, 40% of our kids can read at grade level. We're spending a lot more time on foolishness in our schools than what we should be spending time on. And, we're going to make sure that materials in our library actually help students learn to read. And frankly, these materials don't. And so
the argument from the ACLU against this, which, again, it's the ACLU, I get it. But, how, I guess I'm trying to think in my mind, how do you defend leaving those on the shelf? I'm confused.
Freedom of speech, that the authors have a right to deliver their speech in their books to individuals, and that those individuals have a right to
by the way, I would agree with that if they're 18 or above. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so that's their preliminary. These are minors. There's a difference. I mean, this would be like saying, Dan, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this would be like saying it's okay to allow anyone in the strip club. You don't need to be 21 years or whatever. I don't even know what the limit is. Shows you how much I know. But whether it's 18 or 21, we have drinking age limits. We have all sorts of things along those lines. How is that any different than this?
Well, their other argument is that they believe that these books contain LGBTQ material, and that these books are African American authors, and therefore we're trying to deny that.
Oh, geez.
Again, these books are not in any way connected to that, and they weren't eliminated because of that. 5 of the 19 books may have some theme related to an LGBTQ topic, but it's not because of that topic that they were removed. It's because of the graphic content. And again, that's the frustration, is their framing of the argument is untrue. The content is what the problem is, and we've got examples of every one of these books and why it did not belong in the library where it's at. And again, our frustration is the lower court judge here in Denver, who issued the preliminary injunction that now has been paused by the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, refused to have a hearing, did not even offer the district the opportunity to come in and present our argument, issued a preliminary injunction twice. First, issued at 10th Circuit Court, did not step in but realized they might, and she stayed her own order. After waiting another week, reissued her preliminary injunction, and now the 10th Circuit Court has stepped in and issued an administrative stay. And so we're right now waiting for the 10th Circuit Court to act on our motion for stay and appeal at that level. So,
and what's our time frame on all that look like, Dan?
We will receive their response to our motion for stay and appeal tonight, before the close of business today, and then we have a week to respond to their response, and then the court should take that up sometime next week, and then at that point we'll know whether they're going to remand it back the district court or whether the 10th Circuit will hear the case at that point. So we expect something by the end of next week.
How do all of our listeners that are out there listening to this, in some cases either shocked or not, I mean, some of them may have already heard some of this story and it may not be anything shocking to them. I am always appalled at these things when I hear it. But people that are listening, if they want to get involved and help, how do they do that, Dan?
Yeah, ElizabethSchoolDistrict.org is our website. There is a link at the very top of the page for folks who are willing to help us. Like I said, this could be a costly battle, so we appreciate anyone willing to help us there. And further down on that page is a link that will provide ongoing updates. All of our filings, all of our court filings are there, and certainly any updates that come from us will be there. So folks who are willing to follow along, we certainly appreciate it, and just the opportunity, John, to get the word out and share this. We really appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you guys, and as we move forward and anything else comes up and you want to make other announcements, I know you're going to be doing that on the website as well. But if you want to get something direct out to us, listeners and so on, just let me know, Dan. And yeah, we want to help as much as we can. To me, this seems pretty, I mean, again, I'm not the ACLU. I don't think like those knuckleheads do. But to me, this seems pretty cut and dried.
It certainly feels that way to us. And like I said, our focus is on educating kids and making sure that we increase the reading ability of our kids. Mm-hmm. That's what we're here for. And this seems like a no-brainer for us to defend and give other districts a right to do the same.
Awesome. Dan, appreciate you. Keep your chin up. Let us know how things go.
Appreciate it, John.
You betcha,
man.
So appreciate you very much. No, thank you for filling us in. And again, that's Elizabeth. That's with a Z. ElizabethSchoolDistrict.org. ElizabethSchoolDistrict.org. That is the website that you can go to.